Good morning. It's Thursday morning, and on Thursday mornings we focus on the future. And we've been walking through the book of Acts to see how God has unpacked the future of His church, beginning with its founding at the Pentecost through the Apostle Peter, the rock upon which he built his church, and now the continued ministry of the apostles. And this morning we come to chapter 4 of the book of Acts, the first 4 verses. You know, God is a people person. He's a people person. Now, I know that because of all of the evidence in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, I know it because of that little baby in a basket. Remember that story? The king had decreed that he was going to kill all of the babies in Egypt. And its mother, because she was desperate, put the baby in a basket and tarred the bottom of the basket so it would float and sent him off downriver, down the Nile River. And that baby was rescued by God through the daughter of the king. Amazing, amazing story. So God cared about that little baby and its mother. I know it because of the story of a single mother left to die in the wilderness with her son Ishmael. Her name was Hagar. And even though she wasn't part of the chosen people, God found her, saw her in the wilderness, and saved her, and even blessed her son Ishmael, even though he was not Jacob. Not nearly as important as Jacob, but God cared for people. He's a people person. Jesus in the New Testament is a people person. He focused on the littlest people, even literally the little person named Zacchaeus, who climbed a tree, a tax collector, ignored and scorned by others because of his role, his position in society. This little man climbed a tree, and out of all of the people who lined the streets to see Jesus that day, Jesus looked up and saw Zacchaeus and invited himself to his house. And he later became a believer. God and Jesus care about little people. Jesus cared about the lame, the blind, the beggars, the little people of that society. And so should we. In the scripture this morning, there were little people and there were the powers. You know, there are always the powers along with the people. There are the powers of society, the powers of government, the powers in the school, the authorities, the politicians, the powers in Hollywood, and on and on and on. But God cares not only about them, but especially about the little people. In our story in Acts chapter 4, the first 4 verses, Peter preaches his second sermon. The first one happened at Pentecost, and then he and John went on to care for the little people and healed a blind beggar. The apostles were people persons. And then in chapter 4, Peter preaches his second sermon. And I want you to notice, as you read the scripture this morning, that Peter preached to the people. Now the powers were there too. There were the priests, there was the captain of the temple, and the Sadducees. But the problem with powerful people is that sometimes they don't have room for God. And so as they listened to Peter preach, they were annoyed. And so they threw Peter and John in prison. They were caring for the little people. And at the end of the sermon, many of those people believed. And the church grew to over 5,000 people because God is a people person. Now, there were consequences. Peter and John were thrown into prison and later would suffer along with the other apostles for caring for people. But that's what God has given us to do, to care for the little people, the smallest people in our lives. So that's the lesson we draw from the scripture this morning as we look to our future. Pray for the little people in your lives. Care for the little people. Be a people person. Care for the people that no one else cares for, that other people scorn because they can't care for themselves and they have no power. But those are the very people for whom Jesus died. So think of one of those people in your life today. Pray for that person and be a people person. Find ways that you can care for those people in your life. God bless your Thursday.